when we die.
Good morning. This is the Blain's World podcast that can now be found a whole bunch of different places, but your best bet is to go to the website where it's located, blainesworld.net. That's blainesworld.net. And you can find us there on YouTube if you want to watch this podcast, or if you want to listen to us, you can listen to us on Spotify. You can listen to us on Apple Podcasts. The key is just find us and you'll hopefully enjoy the show. I'm your host, Blaine Greenfield, and I'm here in my Zoom studio in lovely downtown Fairview, North Carolina. And each week we focus on the positive news and information about people and organizations in both Western North Carolina and throughout the country. And toward that end, it's my pleasure to introduce my first two guests, and they are Steve and Cheryl. Is it Modlin? Is that how you pronounce it? Modlin? And if you want, guys, you can wave to all your fans and friends who are watching this. So you can give them a wave if they're watching this. You want to wave to everybody? There you go. And that's Steve and Cheryl. And their background actually is kind of interesting. I think very interesting. From law enforcement to barbecue sauce, Steve and Cheryl have created a most interesting chapter in life. Steve was a special agent for the North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation, and Cheryl worked as a probation parole officer. To unwind from stresses of work, they began making tasty barbecue sauces for friends and family, eventually decided to embark on an adventure in the specialty food business with Old Mule Company. And so the first question I'll ask you guys is, aside from your careers in law enforcement, when did you decide you wanted to get into the barbecue sauce business?
Well, I was making this in college, I don't know why you do things like that, and just kind of stumbled into it and was giving it out as gifts for Christmas. So back in the mid to early 80s, I just give it out as Christmas gifts because I couldn't afford real presents. And after we met, got married, as we say, people we thought were our friends told us we ought to start a business. And we eventually got there. It took us about 6 or 7 years with the career starting and family starting. Most of the people that encouraged that at that point, we don't really talk to them anymore because they sent us on this road.
Yeah. Now,
It's an interesting journey.
Now, when you started making the barbecue sauce, I'm asking this, I guess, of Cheryl, was this kind of the first thing you found out about him, or was it, did he rise? Was this on the second date or the third date, or when did you know he was this?
No, it was probably at Christmas after we started dating in February. We started dating in February, and then the family was getting together and doing homemade Christmas gifts, and I think that was the first that I knew of sauce. But when we moved to Polk County, we bought a farm and we had 3 kids, and it's like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? We both work full time. How are we going to, make extra income? And that's when we, said, okay, maybe we will give the sauce thing a go.
But that must have been a surprise for you. So you were going out with this guy for a while, and you didn't know he had this secret. He's hiding from you, and then all of a sudden, come Christmas, he brings this sauce. Now, hopefully, you liked it at the first time you tasted it.
Yeah, I did. I did not like it being cooked in the house, though.
Yeah.
It was fun.
So at that time, that's what you were doing, Steve. You were cooking it in the house.
In college, I got a good deal on a pressure cooker because it had no gasket. It was at a discount store, so I got that pot, and I had a Coleman propane stove. Originally, I was doing it in a downstairs kitchen in the dorm. That didn't go real well, but you have to boil it. There's a lot of steam and a lot of peppers, and so I got a Coleman. I had a Coleman gas-fired propane stove, and so I would started it in the house, and we decided that wasn't going to work, just doing small pots and experimentation. So I moved it out onto the porch on the Coleman stove, and then we kind of evolved from there over years.
How did you learn to do this?
I don't know that I still have. It's just trial and error. What a lot of people don't understand is that was over 30 years ago. There was no internet.
Right.
So you had to go find people and get advice from people and research. And it was a whole different world.
So you mean you didn't look it up on the YouTube and find out somebody making it?
No, the cyber web was no help back then.
Now, I guess times have changed. I don't know, do you have any YouTube videos of you making this?
We do not. There's some videos out there that have been done of our production. We have one on our website at oldmule.com. It shows kind of the process that we've evolved to. It wasn't always, it's not as complicated process now, but it used to be even more streamlined.
So now, Charlotte, you
It's
indicated
simple.
that in terms of in the house, so you weren't a big fan of making this in the house. What, does it have a smell to it, or?
Well, I think at the time it did, and we were in our first house was pretty small, so the kitchen was very small, and the steam was pretty overwhelming, and you really couldn't breathe. It's like, oh my gosh, this has to go outside.
So it went on the back porch.
Yeah.
Okay. So now, where do you make it?
We have a certified facility about 130 feet behind the house here on the farm. And we've been there, I mean, the kids have grown up with it. We were in the basement for a number of years and moved out to this building. So that's been a long time,
So
probably 15, 16 years ago.
So what I hear you saying, so you have this now facility away from, it's still on the land, but it's away from the house?
Yes,
Is that it?
just about 120 feet.
So this is cool. So in terms of manufacturing it, are you the only two manufacturing, or do you now have people working for you?
It's just us right now.
Yeah, we like to say we built the whole company on child labor, and they turned out to be great adults, and they went off and became very successful so that they wouldn't be doing this every weekend. But
So now it's just two of you
just the
making
two of
all
us.
this
Yeah,
stuff?
we've had a few people over the years that helped us, but primarily just the family, which is
Well,
now it's-
Well, it's funny you say that, Steve, because a buddy of mine, it reminds me of, grew up on his dad's farm, a dairy farm. The exact same thing. The minute he graduated high school, he was out of there. In terms of, you were saying your kids, and your kids had helped along the way in the business?
Yes.
But he couldn't wait, so he joined the army. The minute he graduated high school, he didn't want to be involved in this. Your kids had the same experience?
Well, I don't know that it was quite that negative. I think in high school they found a lot of reasons and activities that kind of conflicted with the cook schedule. But one of our sons and his wife is living across the road now, and they're involved when they can be. They have their own careers. But over the years, they were doing store demos and doing deliveries and letting them, even as children, go up and handle the money with the customer or whatever. It was good for the children. They always got paid for it to some degree, but it was a good experience for them. They take a lot of pride in the company.
So Cheryl, if you would, describe the process then. So, I'm very impressed that the two of you are just making this stuff now out of your house, literally, or away from the house. How long does this take? Is this something you do every weekend, or how often do you do this?
It depends on what our order before production. So if we got a big order and a couple of our distributors place a big order, then yeah, we'll cook 2 times a week. But then sometimes it'll be once a month, so it's just depends on what we have going on.
We don't have a lot of space to cook. A lot of companies that might use a co-packer will order multiple pallets that'll last them a year or two. And it's, the product, of course, is fairly stable, but it's still older. With us, we try not to do that, but we also don't have a place to store a lot of it. So when we cook a batch, one or 2 pallets would be about what we would hold, but we have some places that'll buy a half a pallet at a time. So you kind of have to be prepared to either cook or have it on hand.
So describe, because again, I know nothing about the process. Describe what happens. So you get an order, and you decide to start making this stuff like crazy. In terms of like how much product do you need to buy, and talk about the kinds of products you need. You don't have to tell your trade secrets here, but in essence, what goes into making the sauce, and how do you make it?
Love. No.
Okay, it's important. By the way, do you put that on your list of ingredients? Do you put
No,
that
it
on?
is not on the list of ingredients.
Food for thought. You might want to think about that. I love the answer, but go ahead. So,
well, we do have, we keep some inventory on hand. So Cheryl will normally check the website because we do online orders. And so she can process the orders and get those packed for shipment from UPS or FedEx. So we have that kind of ongoing. The cooking process, I normally do the start of the cook, and that's basically first step, making sure you have the ingredients. And over the years with the jobs and the kids at the farm, more than once I've gone out and started and find out we don't have everything, and it's like just chaos. So we've gotten much better, making sure we have everything in-house to do a batch. And we have a large 350-gallon steam jacketed kettle that runs off of the boiler. And it's basically getting the ingredients weighed, measured, and into the pot and getting them cooked to the right level. And then we have a pump that pumps it into a hopper, a filling machine I had a gentleman make for me here in North Carolina. And then we have an automated conveyor system to fill the jars when that goes well. Sometimes it doesn't go well, but and then they go down at Cheryl's receiving on the back end with the jars, the labels, and checking lids, and putting them on a rack to cool. That's the stream. And we have a video on our website of that.
I'll have to see it. Too bad next time we have you on, we'll show the video. You know, it'd be cool to watch it. But Cheryl, I know you got some. Show me some of the bottles you have there in front of you of the sauce.
This is our, I don't know if you can see it, but that's our original. That was our first sauce that we came up with, was original and what we call a half kick. Because we have the mule theme, we have a half kick, a full kick, a no kick, a mustard base, and a smoked chipotle. But the original was our first recipe that he'd been making, and then we expanded, and we also have a new flavor, mountain apple. So
this just came out last month. So that's the mountain apple, and get it where you see it.
And describe, if you would, Steve, what's the mountain apple like?
Well, we had a request that it not be so spicy, that particular one, from a customer that was really interested in it. So we dialed back the peppers a little bit. None of them are really hot. Even our hot's not overly hot. But this one's just got a little bit of pepper hit to it. And then we're bringing in some apple cider vinegar and apple juice for the apple flavoring. And it's just trying to get that apple flavor so that it's noticeable but doesn't taste like apple jelly. You know, not trying to go over the top. It's full of barbecue sauce. So we've done one full run of that. And we're about out, and we're going to have to cook another one.
Back to when you started doing this, for college conceivably, when was the first time you made barbecue sauce?
That would have probably been in college, 1983, 84.
And had you cooked before, or what made you do this?
I was not a chef tell. I knew how to do the basics and cook an omelet. It was probably more a creative bent, because we also played with woodworking. You know how that went in the dorm. So it's more just trying to do something a little creative, halfway constructive. I don't know why I ended up on barbecue sauce, but it's the North Carolina.
So it wasn't a family thing, or your family hadn't made this before?
My dad had messed with some, and he'd go to the fair. Next day, he's back trying to make corn dogs, stuff like that. But not a real big barbecuing background, other than we were from Eastern North Carolina, and barbecue is big down there. It's a whole different sauce, but we just always into barbecue down east.
Well, I'm thinking, like, for example, as we speak, the North Carolina Fair, I guess, is underway. Have you ever been to the fair?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Not as a company, but we've been there.
Oh, but you haven't sold your product as a company. I think that might be, people might want to see it there. Or have you ever entered the sauce in competitions of any sort?
A few along the way. We always said we don't play games with our sauce. But a lot of those is we just never had the time. I mean, we were working 40 to 60 hours a week on call, 24 hours a day, and just, trying to do anything to promote your company was very difficult. A lot of times we would start cooking, and one of us would have to go. Have to shut it down and just kind of do away with that batch. So
we've been displayed with Goodness Grows.
Yes, we were one of the early Goodness Grows, the North Carolina Marketing. Got to BNC, they call it now, with their marketing. So we were one of the first companies with that program. We've had a lot of barbecue teams use us and promote us, and just a lot of stuff that's kind of fallen our way over the years.
And Cheryl, in terms of your background, had you ever had anything even remotely similar to this that you'd be making, like you were a cook of some sort?
No, not at all. I could cook, but the barbecue sauce is just it was a way for us to stay local and try to sustain extra money, I guess, so to speak.
It's something the kids could be involved
Yeah.
in rather than just another gig. It's something the kids could be part of.
Because the state is good, it's got great benefits, but you're not going to get rich on that. Not that we're getting rich on
There's
making barbecue
there's
sauce,
tens of dollars to be made in the barbecue sauce.
But
And if you look also at how much time you put into it, it's probably even half of the tens of dollars, you know.
Yes.
It's a very time-consuming thing. But you were lucky, I guess. So you're going out with this guy. You didn't even know he had this secret passion. And it's fortunate. It turns out, did you at least like the sauce?
I did like the sauce.
Okay. When you were both in law enforcement, did they know you were doing this kind of as a hobby or as a side gig?
They did. I mean, you had to have permission for all of that, both of us.
Yeah.
And
So-
that was a problem with the company because neither one of us really promoted anywhere within the areas we worked, which for me was the western 16 counties. So any sales we did, we went up towards Boone or someplace I didn't work, just so there'd be no conflicts. And so that's where the kids would get in on the delivery, and we would take one at a time and run a route.
Now, was that the plan as you're getting the business off the ground, as you're developing it? I love the idea of getting kids involved, but also, were you both thinking that when you weren't in law enforcement, this is what you wanted to do?
I don't think we were thinking. It just evolves. I mean, I don't know. We've had a plan, but the small business tends to chart its own course sometimes.
Sure. What about when the pandemic hit? How did that affect you?
We did pretty good. Steve was very vigilant in getting additional customers, so he approached a lot of butcher shops because we found that a lot of people were still going to butcher shops to get their meat, and so we picked up quite a few stores, and they were quite busy.
Yes, and we were anticipating a real fall off, but we were very nervous about our cash flow and all the business concepts, and then it turned out it was a non-issue. So we were behind in our cooking for almost a year trying to get caught up.
Kind of that really worked out well. If folks want to find the barbecue sauce, you mentioned, I'll ask you, what's the website again?
oldmule.com.
Okay.
OLDMULE.com.
Okay. And so they can actually order online as well. But can they find out online? They can also find out local stores where it's at?
Yes.
We do have a store locator. We try to keep it current. And not all the sauces are at all the stores. We don't really have a big tracking. We just came out with a new rub this year too, so that's just getting out in some of the stores.
But what kind of stores can it be found at?
Well, the original, which she held up earlier, is the one that's Mass General Store, Ingles, a lot of mom and pops. The Food Line has it in a local section. Ingles is a local section. Harris Teeter's a local section. Lowe's Foods has that and our smoked Chipotle on the sauce aisle. Publix has it in a local section. That's all pretty much statewide and a little into South Carolina. We've got Farmers Market in Raleigh, Joyce's Produce. There's a lot of little mom and pops that have been with us since the beginning, and we've, as she mentioned, we expanded to probably 30 butcher shops, just mom and pop shops down in Florida, Georgia, Tennessee. And so the rub is what I mentioned. We've just Mule Dust Rub. Our daughter-in-law came up with the name, and we worked on that for almost a year, getting the label right. So that's just rolled out this summer too. So.
It must have been very exciting for you the first time you had it in a store and to actually see it. Do you remember what store you were in the first one?
Well, we had mom and pops
Right.
starting almost immediately. And like I said, the kids would go and they would just put that. But I think when we first traveled towards to the beach and we stop at a grocery store that's supposed to have it, and you've never been in the store and you walk in, I don't remember what store it was, but just to walk in and see it on the shelf is a weird feeling because it went through a small distributor, a regional distributor. But yeah, it was different.
I have a lot of friends that will send us pictures. Hey,
Yes.
You're in the store, and they think it's pretty cool. So, as well as we know the people that make that. So,
We were talking.
it's a great feeling.
kidding about this, and it's an idea you could also use. But if you're not in a store, Steve, I'll give you a marketing idea. You should just send the kids or relatives or friends to a store that doesn't have it and said, I want Old Mule Rub or whatever we call it. And they said, well, where is it? And the key to this, Cheryl, you have a couple of different people go into the store over a week period of time, so first one they blow it off, but second or third, how come people are asking for this product? So if you want to get into a location, keep that in mind. You can try that sometime.
We always tell people, make sure you find the manager and ask for that.
And I said, well, that's a good way to do it. That's interesting. Do you ever get a store call you up or find out about you because somebody asked about it like that?
Oh, we do. We just had one down in eastern North Carolina. We were coming back from the beach. We swung by and dropped off some samples for them. So yeah, we do have some stores find us. And yeah, it's always nice. Then you got to figure out what channel, distributor, are you going to ship it to them? How are you going to handle that?
Because I wonder, you told me something which I didn't know. So most of the stores now have places for barbecue sauce, but most of the stores also have a local area where they just have local merchants.
A lot of the grocery stores do.
Yeah, and so that makes you, I guess, stand out a little bit more than if you were in a barbecue sauce aisle there. Lots of barbecue sauce, but I guess less with a local barbecue sauce.
Yeah, you'd kind of get lost on that shelf.
I would think so. Yeah.
Now with Lowe's, we're on the sauce aisle, but we have a pretty good follow at Lowe's Foods, and we've got probably 900 and 1,200 stores that carry us.
Wow.
We've got some up in New England, Massachusetts, Pennsylvania, West Coast.
You do have stores on the West Coast?
We've got a group, Barbecues Galore is a barbecue supply house that grills and all that, and they've carried us since 2004, I think.
Now, when you go around, do you try to go to the stores that carry your products, or do you look at them all the time?
Yeah, why not?
In the groceries especially, you go in and all of a sudden it's not there and it's supposed to be, and you have to figure out why, where the breakdown is, or things like that.
And what Steve will do is because he's the people person. I'm more of the quiet person. So he'll go buy a jar off the shelf and find a couple of people to give the sauce to, just as a way to promote. Because we used to, before the pandemic, we were doing demos in stores, doing taste samplings. But then the pandemic hit, so samplings went away, and so the next thing was to try to get the sauce in people's hands to try it. And so we've been pretty successful. We've had someone that just put a wonderful review on, I think it was Facebook, about him giving, I got this jar of sauce from.
Met the owner.
Yeah. So, and then we do have a Facebook following. We have a lot of like Shane Gentry down in Indian Beach. We just took a trip there over the summer, and he has been a wonderful fan, and he'll always post his pictures of the meats that he's cooking or the meals, and give us a shout out on Facebook. And so we met him and gave him a couple of samples and rubs, and so he's a big promoter.
Well, and also he'll hear the show, tonight's show. We'll listen to it. We just mentioned him. What's your favorite part about running the business?
For me or Steve?
Well, take both.
It's been, we've had some great customers over the many years that we've been doing this, and that's, when you think, you get down and out, or you're thinking, why are we doing this? Should we, look at something else? You'll have some wonderful customers that will call you up or send you a message, an email, to say how much they love the product, keep making it, and so that
It lifts you.
it's rewarding. Yeah.
We had a family in California a few years ago that had been a customer for quite a while, and they were having to relocate because of the wildfires. And they had packed up and were getting ready to pull out of the driveway, and they sent us a letter. But their son jumped out of the car and ran back in. And they said, hurry up. And what he grabbed was his game controller and a jug of Old Mule. And that's the two things he had to definitely have when he left. So he got a T-shirt, and it's just little things like that it meant that much to him.
Do you have that on your website, that letter?
I don't think we do.
You should. That'd be a great letter. I'm going to set you up for a question here, Steve, so you have a big opportunity to answer it right. But I'll kind of phrase it this way. So what's the most enjoyable part of your job with respect to working with your wife?
On a good day?
I set you up for that, guy.
Yeah, on a good day. No, it's the fact that you're doing it yourself, and it is, most people that do what we do, and I know why they do it, they have someone make a product for them and they put a label on it with the name they came up with. That's the normal. There is a great deal of pride and exhaustion that comes from doing it yourself. I mean, people, I don't think fully believe that sometimes, that we do actually cook it, package it, distribute it, and doing that together is it's unusual. It's not every day is a good day, but it has to be enjoyable in the balance, or you just can't do it. So
compare and contrast this career, then your second career, third career, whatever career it is, to your career in law enforcement. How does it compare and contrast?
Towards the end of my career, I was in management. So I briefly went back to work after I retired in 2019 for contract work during COVID. And then you realize after the third week why you retired, because I mean, it's easier to manage your own schedule and not have to worry about other people's schedule and personalities and different things like that. So we certainly prefer our own business, I guess.
Yeah, the only thing is now you only have to manage one person. That's your husband, right? Before you have to manage a whole bunch of people. Same thing too, Steve. How do you feel about this as a career?
When I left law enforcement, and my job was basically investigating major crimes. So I was a slave to the phone. Whenever the phone rang, day or night, vacation, whenever, it didn't matter, you went. And you didn't know when you would come back. You might be gone for 2 or 3 days. To have the control. Now, things get busy and we can't do it all, but you can move stuff around because it's your stuff. And I noticed that as soon as I left law enforcement, I was waking up ready to go, because whatever was on my calendar that day to start the day was something I chose. And if I didn't want to do it, then I chose something different. So the day started better. That sense of controlling your own schedule, your own time, is huge. You can work any 14 hours a day you want. It's very nice.
Whereas as long as you want to work. Yeah, my dad had the same thing too. When I worked for him, guys, he said flex time, same kind of thing. You can work, set your own hours. Come in anytime you want before 9, leave anytime you want after 5. You can set your, so if you want to work 14-hour, 16-hour days, you can. Your typical day is how many hours?
It varies. I would say, well, like last year, we cooked over 50 cook days, which is only once a week. But then you've got trucks coming in. We have to unload the trucks, and that's almost a half mile out to the road that we have to bring it in on a lift. And, so even just getting a couple of pallets of jars in, 4 or 5 pallets, can be a 4 or 5 hour ordeal, because we have to down stack them to get them with the tractor. So I would say we average anywhere from, we run a lot of 12, 13-hour days and a lot of 4-hour days, 5-hour days. And then, of course, we have the farm we have to fit into. We have sheep. We raise hair sheep. So that has to get fit into that. And we have new puppies now, herding puppies. So it all kind of stacks up.
Okay, so it keeps you busy, though. Is that correct?
Yeah, very busy.
Okay, great. So again, folks,
I always wonder how we did this
with kids.
Well, yeah.
And our farm was, we had at one point we had 100 up to 150 sheep, and we're like, how did we
What were we thinking?
Yeah, sauce farm.
We didn't say
jobs.
we were smart.
How many sheep do you have now?
About 20.
Yeah,
25.
and the key question is, forgetting your wife, do the sheep like the sauce?
Do the sheep?
Yeah. Do they ever get that?
It gets combined with lamb a lot. I understand.
By the way, what is talking about the sauce? So, what do people typically use the sauce for? Aside from gifts, great gift item.
She came up with a whole recipe brochure of different things.
I'd say, and that's what you have to try to promote about the sauces. It's not just for grilling meat or grilling whatever you might be using, because it's a great condiment for sandwiches. We use it on the mustard sauce that we have is great in egg salad and salmon salad, nachos. So trying to get people to their mindset to say, because we get a lot of customers says, well, I just don't grill out.
Right.
So it's like, well, you don't have to use it for grilling. You can use it in chilies and
Our son puts it
spaghetti.
on his omelets.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Our son, the oldest, he wouldn't eat spaghetti sauce, but he would eat the noodles with the sauce. So trying to get people to see different ways of using the sauce.
And I guess, of course, the one final thing we'll mention, it makes, I assume, a really great gift item.
Yes.
So if people want to get, when we get into the next holiday season, you want to get something, and it's certainly something unusual, a little bit different, you'll be glad to sell them the barbecue sauce?
Yes.
And we're just getting ready to start looking at our cook schedule going into the holidays. And with the rub now, that's starting to catch on. We're getting a lot of mail order requests for the rub. So that's going to be a new item to
And
have this year.
assume, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I assume if somebody wants to buy a gross lot of this stuff, we'll give them a little break on the price if they buy.
We'll work with them any way we can. We're easy to work with.
144 jars. Call Steve up. We'll talk about it. So again, just if you repeat, the best bet to find out information about the company is the website?
Oldmule.com. That's OLDMULE.com.
And feel free to check it out. And again, I want to thank both Steve and Cheryl Modlin. I have to tell you folks, you are definitely been doing this different stations for about 15 years, and you're definitely the first barbecue sauce folks I've ever met. So thank you very much. I really enjoyed it.
We appreciate the opportunity.
Okay, and hopefully we'll bump into you sometime live and in person. Thanks, guys. Okay.
Thank you very much.
So as they work their way out of the studio, Laurie, I'll be with you in just a second. So we'll kind of say goodbye to these folks. And as I welcome my second guest, let me mention that you're watching and listening to the Blaine's World podcast. We're here now on Best Bet is go to blainesworld.net, and you'll find information on how to listen to it or watch it, and you'll get a chance to meet a friend of mine who's my second guest of the show, and she is Laurie Richardone. And Laurie, you can wave to all your fans and friends who are watching this. Okay.
Hello, everyone. Hey, Diego Basels, who is my editor and my designer and my everything, my right hand.
Okay.
So a shout out to Diego.
Okay, and that's also Laurie. I'm seeing you now. I'm very impressed. This is your new home. I haven't seen the new home in the background.
It is, yes. This is, the next milestone. We never know where life is going to take us. So yeah, I just bought a townhouse last September. And it feels really lovely.
Is this where you do your podcast out of also?
I do. I have an office that has a beautiful magnolia tree right outside. So I feel like I'm in a little tree house. And that's where I do my show.
Super. I should mention that Laurie Richardone is an inspirational chef and health coach with a podcast on seasonal living, books on cultural cooking, and a line of wellness products. Laurie empowers people to achieve well-being through food and mindfulness. She does this work through her podcast, cookbooks, and classes on healthy seasonal living. And Laurie, the question I asked, had you as guests a couple of years ago when we weren't on as a podcast, but in terms of this whole interest you have in food and organic living, cooking, whatever, when did you develop that interest?
I was in my 20s, Blaine, when really I discovered that processed food and a lot of food had just a lot of chemicals and pesticides and preservatives. So really much of my adult life, I have been eating in a healthy way. And I also grew up in a family, I grew up in Brooklyn in a large Italian family where my grandmother had a vegetable garden and grew herbs. And, the truck used to come, a vegetable truck, from local farmers with produce that was beautiful and natural. So I always had an understanding and an appreciation for eating with the seasons and natural food.
When did you decide you want to make this kind of your livelihood?
Well, when I think that, I was in the beauty industry, for 20 years, I had a salon in Santa Fe. I still make my beautiful products that are all organically grown, LR Modern Alchemy. But when I was looking at kind of what was next for me, the third act, if you will, Jane Fonda talks about it, and we have, our first, second, and third act. So I really wanted to make it count and also contribute to the community. So I've always loved food, been cooking since I'm 10 years old, went to school to become a health coach, really for my own personal, moving forward in my personal life with health and wellness. And it was a natural progression, Blaine. It just kind of happened organically. It really didn't take a lot of effort. I mean, every business, of course, takes some effort, and you have to be proactive. But it happened pretty organically when I look at it in hindsight.
Well, you mentioned, I want to see if I have them all. You mentioned this is like your third act. So I got the second act was the beauty business. What was the first act?
Well, first act is kind of, when I say act, it's, from up until say 30 years old, we're developing who we are, discovering who we are. I always knew actually that I was going to have a career in hairdressing at 8 years old when I was cutting my Barbie doll's hair. So I knew that I was going to go there. And then, the second act, say from 30 to 50 to 60, you're in your career, you're building, whether it's a family or your business. And for me, when people say, retirement, that word doesn't really mean anything to me, because I'm someone that will always be involved in something. I love having a project. I'm very creative. I'm passionate about a lot of things. So how can I do what I love and I'm good at, and my gifts and talents, and how can I bring them into the world, to my community, to contribute to living a harmonious life?
It's funny you say that, because I had the kind of same thought process. And so I don't tell people I'm retired, but I say people I'm rewired. So that was even my title for a long time. I'd call myself a rewirement expert in training, because I think that's it's kind of interesting. I think you're a very good example of this, that even now you seem to always be doing different things, which is kind of cool, which I admire about you.
And not so good news.
Well, let's talk about that, because again, I think that's how I first met you, I guess, through Asheville Score. I'm not exactly...
Rosa, we have a mutual friend, Jerry Rosa, who
okay.
is a dear friend of mine.
That's how we met. Oh,
He
Jerry.
was your neighbor. And he said, Laura, you have to, when we were getting to know each other, and I told him everything that I did, he said, you have to reach out to Blaine.
And
Jerry. I did. So it was Jerry Rosa.
Okay, if you're listening, or you will be listening, Jerry. But yeah, I love Jerry, and he was my neighbor for a bunch of time. And such a great guy. So bump into him, or I'll have to bump into him, tell him I said hello. Oh, that was really cool. So I met you through Jerry, and then we started talking. And again, I was kind of amazed. You do like about 73 different things sort of simultaneously. So I'm trying to think. So I first met you. You were telling me about your podcast. And
I didn't have a podcast. I've come full circle, Blaine. Your show was the very first show I was on, WPVM.
Yeah.
And after you interviewed me, we had a phone conversation.
I remember, right.
And you said, Laurie, you should have your own show. So you planted the seed.
Well, and we'll talk about it off the air, because, it was so good. I remember I saw you, and you were talking out of where you were living. And so let's talk about that further, because, I think you have a real gift in the show, because you seem to have so much fun with it. But
I insist upon it.
But you were doing other stuff though at times. So you were.
I had a YouTube channel, so I was cooking classes. I've been cooking and teaching now for about 7 years, and my kitchen is gluten-free. So I've been cooking all the while. Personal chef, cooking for people, having classes in my North Asheville kitchen, which I still do. And like I said, my YouTube channel, working on a cookbook, which I know that you're aware of.
Well, not only, you were at one time, I can just show it. I'm so proud of it. You did such a great job with this. Was this your first cookbook?
That's my first cookbook, yes, published. My first published cookbook,
Okay.
Gluten-Free Italian Recipes. And it's a wonderful, very accessible book, Blaine, because it doesn't have an overwhelming amount of recipes, but it also kind of reads like a story. It's a way to eat. I'm Italian, grew up in an Italian family, so it was inspired by all my favorite foods and my background of foods that I really could no longer eat because I've been gluten-free for over 10 years. But I wanted people to know, because Italian food, everyone loves Italian food. So the inspiration came from wanting people that say are celiac or that have gluten sensitivities to know you can eat delicious Italian food. And I could share with you my experience and show you some really accessible recipes. So,
well, you actually talk about it. I'm getting hungry just looking at this again too. But who would have thunk chicken parmesan? I had chicken parmesan last night. Or even talk a little bit about, and I know people love it, pizza. You can have a cauliflower pizza. For the folks who don't know it, describe what it is.
Well, I mean, and I also do make, but cauliflower pizza is a wonderful low carb because a lot of wheat, and that's, we'll probably touch on that, can cause a lot of bloatedness and inflammation in people. So, and everyone loves pizza. So the cauliflower pizza was a way to have kind of a low inflammatory ingredient crust, and it makes a beautiful crust from cauliflower that you roast. The full recipes in the book. I won't go through the whole thing. And I add some Parmesan cheese and some eggs to, hold it all together, and some beautiful spices. And that is the crust for the pizza, which is really a blank canvas, Blaine. I have a pizza margherita, which essentially is sauce and some beautiful buffalo mozzarella gets melted on perfectly, or grilled vegetables. You could put anything on pizza. People put pineapple on pizza.
Just going to, I like it. No,
no. I'm a purist, Blaine. I'm not going, and it could be delicious, but I'm a purist when it comes to things of that nature.
But the nice thing about it, and let's talk a little bit about what that entails. So anything you have certainly in the recipe, you call it gluten-free. What about people who have kind of just like this hang-up that, gluten-free, they don't want to taste it? Do you ever encounter people who have that hang up and then they taste some of your stuff and they're amazed they like it as much as they do?
I make a couple of breads. I have an Artisan Bread in my book there that is amazing, really beautiful, crisp crust on the outside. You would never know it's gluten-free. I make pastry crusts, biscuits. People are very surprised because I don't tell people sometimes that it is gluten-free unless they need to know, and they're always surprised. And years ago, gluten-free did have a bad rep and things did taste like cardboard. You go out and have a gluten-free pizza, but it's really evolved. One of my missions was to dissolve the myth that gluten-free is a lesser cuisine. But also, Blaine, you have to know what to do with ingredients, because you have to be able to cook something, because you could cook something with flour and with gluten and you don't really, you're not comfortable in the kitchen and it cannot taste good. So you have to know what to do with ingredients, and always start with really good ingredients, because it doesn't take much to make food taste good if you're working with, really healthy ingredients to start.
What's the key to getting really good ingredients? Like, where should you go to seek them out or buy them?
Well, I have a relationship with all my farmers here in Asheville, and every one of my farmers have been on my podcast, by the way, which my podcast is on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. They're also all on my website, laurierichardone.com. I can spell that later if you would like me to. And so I really sought out farmers, and they're not all certified organic for lots of reasons, but I ask a lot of questions, and I invite people to ask questions when they go to markets and find out what they're putting in their soil and how they're growing their ingredients. So, because when you have healthy soil, Blaine, food is going to taste better. It's that simple. If you're putting pesticides and chemicals, which so many farmers do, which saddens me, really touches my heart. One, that's where a lot of health issues are, absolutely, and they're connecting the dots by the way we're growing food and all the chemicals, et cetera. So you have to, be a little bit of a detective, but if you're getting food that's grown in healthy soil, I really invite people to support your local farmers. We have one of the biggest ecosystems, actually, I think in the world. We have over 40,000 plants here in Asheville, Blaine. So we are blessed with incredible ingredients, delicious ingredients, and there are a lot of farmers that are using the organic principles, even though they're not certified, and then make delicious food.
By the way, have you done that as a show? In terms of where I just asked you the question, how do you find um, organic food, or how do you find? Do you talk about that in your podcast at all?
I do talk about it, you just, my brain is always going, as you said, I have my hands in so many things, and I'm very creative, always have been. Sometimes you need to pull yourself in a little bit and focus on, one particular thing, because I have a lot of things that are in the works right now that need my attention. And that's a great idea, to really do a podcast just on how to find your farmers and questions to ask, and it's a wonderful idea.
No, it just sounds it. Or that's also a blog, a written blog entry, or
Yes.
your next book
Yes.
or something. Gluten-free Italian recipes. But how do you? It's almost I could see, Laurie, you doing a great job on this. How do you become gluten-free? And then so that could cover all the aspects of it. Some recipes, but also the process. When did you become? Were you always like gluten-free, or when did you
No,
become?
I was not, again, growing up in a large Italian family, pasta, bread, pastries, all that wonderful food. And, I had, I'll give you the short of it, I had chronic stomach aches for 2 years. And, a lot of women have a high threshold of pain. We start to well, people in general, we start to tolerate things. And it was suggested to me to give up wheat. This was over 10 years ago. And I don't know, maybe a week, maybe 2 weeks. I don't even think that long. My stomach aches went away, Blaine, completely. And I also used to get a lot of headaches, still have a couple here and there, but not like I used to. And in part, it's because we changed the way we grow wheat, which I'd like to talk about briefly, but I'll stay on point in, how do you become gluten-free? So, and in part, that's what inspired my cookbook, because I wanted people to know, like, you could have those delicious foods that you love so much. I talk about certain staples in the pantry. I actually give cooking classes that are designed to create a gluten-free pantry, just some basics, so it's not overwhelming, like just some ingredients to get you started. And there are so many foods, Blaine, that are naturally gluten-free, like risotto, which is one of the recipes in my cookbook. Rice is naturally gluten-free. So there's a lot of foods that are just naturally that way. So it's a lot easier than you think. And I also think that's where coaching, whether it's life coaching or health coaching or business coaching, I've always had a coach in my life over the years, because it helps us navigate and have more success. Whether it's we want to become gluten-free, how do I do that? It feels overwhelming to me, and just to be a guide for someone, have them manage the plethora of information out there is overwhelming. It's like, how do I know what's right for me, what's right for my body, which we call bioindividuality, because there's no one size fits all, Blaine. Even someone that's gluten-free, they could have a sensitivity to rice flour, which is gluten-free, but their body might not like it. So, as a health coach, you have to be a little bit of a detective and work with people, ask certain questions, get some history. And so there is a process, but it's not as overwhelming and difficult. It could be actually quite simple.
You mentioned gluten-free, different gluten-free items. Is there gluten-free pasta also?
You can gluten-free pasta, yes. And I eat pasta once in a while. I make my own gnocchi, which are little Italian dumplings, which are in my cookbook. But I also, personally, I eat a low-carb diet, because I think we should eat whatever we want once in a while. I'll say that. I don't believe in deprivation. But pasta is starch and turns into sugar. So, I think we should eat those foods in moderation. But there's some wonderful gluten-free pastas, yes.
Talk about something else you do, Laurie. So you mentioned a couple times you have these cooking classes. And describe, if somebody wants to find out about, I guess, gluten-free cooking, what kinds of courses do you offer?
Well, it's right now, which I'm very excited about with Diego, who, my right hand, we are working on online courses, and it's going to be seasonal gluten-free Italian cooking series, which will be offered on my website. We'll figure out how we're going to present that, whether it'll be membership or, that you can get the class on the website, and then, it all gets put into your inbox. We'll, work out those logistics. It'll be very user-friendly and simple. And we're going to do 7 recipes. There'll be printouts of the recipes. I'm doing introductions to all the ingredients, a little bit of their origin, the culture, where the ingredients come from, just to give a little background and introduction to each recipe. And also there will be a health guide and a resource page and an ingredient page. So very excited about that. That should be up and running on my website by the end of October. I just started working on a gluten-free bread baking course, and these will be online virtual courses.
And let me just stop you a second.
Yeah.
To repeat that again. So if people want to find you online or find out about so far any of the stuff we've been talking about, best bet is to go to the website, which is
LaurieRichardone.com. So that's LaurieRichardone.com. And also, Blaine, I also offer, I just did one on Friday. I have, and my kitchen's gluten-free, I have cooking classes, experiences on Airbnb, Asheville. And I actually just did on Friday, a mother and daughter from Charleston came and took a mastering plant-based cooking.
Oh, how cool is that?
It was wonderful. And they cook. They actually just left a review, and they said, whether you cook or not, you'll just learn some new techniques. They kept saying, wow, I didn't know how to do that. Or, there's just always something to learn. And I love teaching classes and teaching cooking and sharing beautiful food. And also because I'm very visual in my background, I do all my own food photography. So I also, we also address, plating food, how to present food, when you're entertaining or just even for yourself, because we do eat with our eyes first.
By the way, you're giving folks or listeners or viewers, if you will, a fantastic idea. I don't know if anybody's thought of this, but you want to give somebody a great party or a great gift. Have a cooking party, have I don't know, how many couples could you work with at a time?
Well, in my personal space, 2 couples, 4 people.
But what a great gift, though.
It is a great gift. And I do have on my website gift certificates. Give the gift of food, give the gift of love through food. And I do a lot of private and couples cooking classes. I had a couple that he gave her for Valentine's Day in February, a cooking class with me.
Yeah, that's funny though. Better gift would be maybe for her to have given him the, the gift. Why is the woman?
I loved that it came from him. I thought he's a good man.
No, he is, but I'm saying, but the gift would be better though. It's implying the woman is going to do the cooking, and it doesn't have to be. It could be the guy to do the cooking or
sure,
something.
Absolutely.
Where they were taking probably fun. They were taking the
They
course
took
together.
the class together.
Okay.
So I had them make separate. We made these beautiful raspberry crostadas, and they each made their own, and they were just so adorable to watch. And I just had them kind of do things that they could present to each other. So I do a lot of themed classes depending on what someone wants to work on, but they're all seasonal. Blaine, I am a seasonal chef, and I cook my way through the seasons depending on what's harvested in spring, summer, autumn, and winter.
Talk about relationships in terms of what about the couple who cooks together or the couple who makes meals together? Good or bad idea?
It depends on the couple. Some people I was married for 25 years, and my former husband, we loved being in the kitchen together. He was my sous chef, and we had a lot of fun. I was a little bossy probably, and softened over the years because it's about really having fun. and doing something together. So you don't necessarily want to make it be about that it has to look a particular way, but more about doing something with your partner and having a good time. So
And
it's a great idea.
you said something interesting. I guess I didn't think too much about it, but the idea of looking good. And how important is that in terms of if you're a cook or preparing food for other people, the aesthetic aspect of it? How important is that?
Well, I mean, if you're a chef in a restaurant, I mean, that's a whole nother story. It's critical. I mean, depending on who you are, there are a lot of restaurants you could have, you know, food that's very rustic. It doesn't have to be fancy. But I think that there needs, you know, texture, color. Again, you know, I was an editorial hairdresser. I worked with a lot of photographers. I am a food photographer, so I'm very aesthetic. So again, it doesn't have to be perfect, but I like to consider color, texture, and the way we marry ingredients. So for me, it's important.
But I would think for other people it would be, because even when you're putting out the dinner or the plate, I guess how it looks, now it's a half the battle, but it's important, you know, that if it looks appealing, it'll be more likely to eat it.
Absolutely. Like when I made these they happen to be vegan. I'm not vegan, this beautiful cashew raspberry cheesecake, but I made it into a parfait that I layered with medjool dates and almonds. And I had these little white flowers on my table and I put little white flowers on top. So it gave it, you know, there's this pink color. Again, you know, I could talk about food all day long, Blaine. I could get off track and, you know, just start talking about the beauty and the aesthetic of food. So, and it gives people ideas. They really enjoyed that. It's like, oh, that's a great idea. If I'm having a party, or sprinkle more parsley around your plate, you give it a little green to the white plate, and it makes it more visually pleasing.
You mentioned flowers, and it reminds me of a buddy of mine in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, many years ago. But he was the first one. He had a restaurant. He was the first one to actually start cooking with flowers, you know, and is that still
edible flowers? Sure, absolutely. I mean, depending, I guess, on where you go, you know, little finer restaurants, a little bit more upscale, but also a lot of people do that. And you know, in a salad, I love to put little edible flowers. It's beautiful. You know, when I get a plate served to me, and again, you know, I'm probably not your, you know, the everyday person. You know, again, my father was a Northern Italian chef, grew up in New York, so I've been exposed to a lot of beautiful, really good food. So those little details, to me, just pick it up a notch.
Also, in terms of details, making a difference. So I'm looking at your book and beautiful pictures. Did you take all the pictures?
They're all my photography.
Okay. So even talk about that. Like, give I don't know if people can see it, but
raspberry almond cake.
I'm just getting hungry looking at it.
I know.
Is there a secret to even photographing food? There are a lot of secrets, but give me one secret if you want to make food look good.
Lighting. The lighting has to be right. So that's probably, you know, it's the top two. You know, a lot of photographers would argue like lighting, number one, lighting, and then composition. And I also, when I do classes, you know, I talk about that. If someone's interested in plating and wanting it, you know, you have to know who your audience is as well. So absolutely lighting, and then composition, making it look interesting.
And then talk about one other thing that you do, I'll say, quote, in your spare time, but all of a sudden then you decide to become an author,
yes.
Doing a book. Was this your first book?
First written book. I have ebooks that you can get on my website, Kindle books. I have a gut health book that is wonderful and really informative, that actually, if people go to my website, on the homepage, if you subscribe, it's a gift and it will go to your inbox. It's a beautiful book on achieving gut health. So I think everyone can benefit from that.
What made you decide to come up with your first cookbook?
Well, and, you know, definitely just my love of food and wanting to share and dissolve the myth that gluten-free cooking is a blessed cuisine, because all the recipes in that book are really delicious. But also, you know, like the chicken parmigiano, for example, is with, you know, seasonal tomatoes in the summer, fresh tomatoes. The breadcrumbs are made from a gluten-free bread that is store-bought. It's in my book. which is on Amazon. You can go to my website and there's a link to Amazon, but my book was published by Amazon, and that's how, if someone's interested in the book, that's how they can get it. So it was really about dissolving the myth that gluten-free cooking is a lesser cuisine. And I love writing also. I write for a publication here in Asheville, Sophia Magazine and 50 Plus Living. I've been writing for 2 years. I'm a contributing writer, and I write an article that's relevant to what's the season, what's important, I think, in life and to the community. It has 50 plus, and kind of as we get older. And then I also share always a seasonal beautiful recipe.
In your opinion, why should people consider, if not becoming gluten-free, becoming more, less, if not completely gluten-free? Why is it a good idea?
Well, also, first and foremost, I think it's important to eat food that is grown without pesticides. So organically grown food. And it is more affordable than a lot of people think. So I think that probably is to eat healthy food that's grown in healthy soil. We changed the way we grow wheat, Blaine, and a lot of people don't realize that wheat it's a 10,000 year food, wheat, maybe even 10,000 years plus. And we used to, so a couple of things changed. We used to mill it by stone. So so one thing, they started using a steel mill. That changed the wheat. It took out a lot of the nutrients and minerals, and then also the cultivation and farming. So it causes a lot of inflammation, and science is really connecting the dots. It's an inflammatory food, so everyone can benefit from eating a gluten-free diet. And I would like to say, through all my travels through Italy, and I've been traveling for over 10 years, I discovered that flours like chestnut and almond flour, garbanzo, just to name a few, are staples of Italian cooking. There are so many beautiful flours other than wheat to cook with that actually make food very interesting and delicious, like my almond tart that you held up the back cover is made with almond flour. It's delicious. So it opens up just so many different ways to use ingredients. But first and foremost, we have changed the way that we grow wheat. Modern wheat is not the same, Blaine, and I think it's a good idea for people to look into it themselves. My 86-year-old mother is now gluten-free. She had a lot of inflammation, a lot of joint pain, and she listens to me. She knows I'm a health coach and that I know a lot, but she also is from a certain generation. So I had her get tested from her doctor for wheat, for gluten, and she had a sensitivity. 86 was hard for her to change, and her health is significantly better.
Is she now gluten-free or mostly?
She still cheats. I'll listen to her. She forgets and she'll, whatever. Oh, I had a tiramisu, or I had this out. And, well, how do you feel, Mom? Because, I had a little stomach ache. So very gently, because you have to meet people where they are as a health coach. That's very important. You can't, force someone to do something. It has to come from them. And as a health coach, what you do is, you inspire, you guide. But there's that accountability piece. It's helpful to have someone guide us through when we're doing a lifestyle change.
And one last question concerns the fact that you're a health coach. Why is it a good idea for somebody to consider working with a health coach, either you or some other health coach, perhaps? But why is that a good idea?
Yeah.
What does a health coach do?
A health coach is really, they do a lot of things. There are a lot of different hats, but essentially, you have to have a certification. I studied 100 different dietary theories. So you have to have, some background in nutrition. But we guide people. I always do a little health history with people, asking certain questions, getting a little bit of their background. You have to be a little bit of a detective. So we inspire, we guide. I think probably the most important thing is the accountability piece. Having someone that holds you accountable, you're going to have more success with whatever it is that you want to do, because someone's like, okay, I said I was going to do X, Y, and Z. So I think it's the accountability piece, and having someone to support you. We all need support and coaching in life, Blaine, right? It takes a village.
And again, if folks want to find out about the coaching aspect of what you do, or again, the book, the photography, the courses, best bet one more time is the website. Would you give it again?
It's laurierichardone.com.
Okay, I'd like to thank Laurie Richardone for being my guest on the second half of the Blaine's World podcast. Also to Stephen Cheryl Modlin, my guest the first half hour, and to the amazing Cappy Tossetti, my producer. Look forward to having you join me each week on BLAINESWORLD.net. You can also find us on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, Spotify, you name it, you can find us. Laurie, as always, a pleasure. Speak to you soon.
Yes, take care, Blaine.
Okay, thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.